Hello, everyone. Welcome to another series in our series of interviews where we speak with companies about the impact of hiring bootcamp graduates or midlife career changers. Um, I am your host, Bukky from Code Chrysalis, and our my co-host, Paul Roberts. Um, the series is focusing on impact, looking at the benefits and the challenges of hiring bootcamp graduates. Throughout the series, we'll look at we'll speak with different companies to hear about their experience. In today's series, we will be speaking with Johnny from TableCheck. Johnny is the CTO and founder of TableCheck. Welcome, Johnny.
Hi.
So, if we can just start with a quick introduction of yourself, you can tell us a little bit about you
Sure.
and your company, and then we will go into your experience hiring midlife career changers or bootcamp graduates.
Sure. Okay. Well, I grew up in Seattle, Washington, and I came to Japan after graduating college in 2007. I worked for originally Lehman Brothers, and then when that collapsed, I went and worked for Nomura Securities, and I ran the algorithmic trading team there. And I was laid off from that in 2012, and very shortly thereafter, in 2013, I founded my current company, TableCheck, I started to help restaurants. I've always loved going out to the amazing restaurants we have in Tokyo and Japan, and when I left my job in finance, I had some sort of time to study the industry, and I learned that they were having lots of problems just managing their reservations from a bunch of different channels, managing their guests. And when we looked at the actual restaurant operations, and my co-founder and I, we found that it was just a complete nightmare. They were getting reservations from 5 different booking sites as well as phone, and then they were printing out all the emails and copying them by hand into a reservation book. So I think one time I booked online and I saw my name written by hand in a book, and I was kind of like, well, what's going on here? And we discovered there was really no app to manage any of that. So that was sort of the genesis of our company, TableCheck, where we started by making an app to help restaurants manage their reservations from all these channels. And then we had the ability to manage your tables, which guest was seated at which table. We added our own booking capability. And then, fast forward 10, 11 years later, we're now operating, and we have clients in 35 different countries. We have offices in about 9 countries, something like 10,000 restaurants on our platform today. We've seated over 1 billion diners, through various channels and booking in our site. Yeah, it's grown quite a lot, and we're continuing to invest in hiring, continue to hire bright new code boot camp graduates, as well as people of all different levels. And our goal is to build the best restaurant reservation management platform in the world, and we're working very hard every day to do that.
Mm, thank you for that, Johnny. Yeah, I mean, it sounds. We met for the first time last week, and it was interesting to hear, how far you've come, and also hear, the plans you have for Table Check. So I'm looking forward to that. But you've hired um, 3 bootcamp or Code Chrysalis bootcamp graduates, but I never asked you this. I'm not sure if you can answer this, but have you hired other bootcamp grads that are not um, Code Chrysalis graduates or self-taught um, developers? Just out of curiosity.
We probably have hired other bootcamp graduates. Actually, I think we've hired probably more than 3 from Code Chrysalis. Probably some that maybe predate your time there. Um, but I'm sure we've hired others. There are other
Hmm.
boot camps in Tokyo, and we've also, yeah, we've hired, but many of our developers are self-taught or they had studied in college. or they had, their mid career hires who had been doing, coding at other companies. So we have quite a diversity we hire from, but there are other boot camp graduates.
Okay. Okay. Interesting. So from your observation of, what's your experience with hiring these mid-career professionals, the ones who did not follow the traditional route of, studying computer programming in university and then moving into working as a developer?
Well, I think it's relatively rare that we'd hire someone mid-career who wasn't in a coding job previously. So we don't hire people to train them if they have no coding experience, but we do hire boot camp graduates. I would say there's a mix, right? Because it takes a certain amount of our bandwidth to train someone, and so we don't want to be starting from complete zero. At the same
Mm,
time, we you know we will hire a certain number of people that we will sort of train within our own processes. And when looking at boot camp graduates, many times they are unfamiliar with just general way that software is developed at a company. I think Code
mm,
Chrysalis probably does a fairly good job of training people on Git and things like that. But some people we
mm,
hire are unfamiliar with sort of how pull requests and stuff work. And so we have some people we have to train on that, even if they know how to write code itself.
mm, mm. Okay. And so in terms of, in terms of actually, let me rephrase that, because I guess the misconception, at least in my time, in this tech scene, the concept, the perception of bootcamp graduates or self-taught professionals is that it is, many people perceive them as, they learn it as a hobby and they don't have the technical ability to hit the ground running or to already start contributing, versus someone who has worked in a company as a developer before. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think I see it a little bit differently. In my view, the best developers are the ones who want to be coding in their free time too, that are so
Mm,
so passionate about building things that even the amount of coding we have within the 8-hour days we work in the company is not enough to satiate their interests. So they'll work on their own side projects outside of work. It could be open source. It could be, some new technology they want to learn. It could be AI is a popular one. We have people who in their free time are training their own AI models, or trying to pick apart how these LLMs are working. So
Mm.
we definitely want to hire those kind of people who are so passionate that they don't just see it. They don't see coding as something they're doing just for 8 hours. It's something they're, you know, living, breathing, and sleeping to some degree. And I think with boot camps, when you look at boot camps versus self-taught, the reason why I'm sort of a little bit biased towards self-taught people is it's just clearly that there's just nothing that's going to stop them from learning, and
mm,
they don't even really need a boot camp or a teacher to teach them things because they'll just go and figure it out on their self. I mean, that's essentially what self-taught means. And so
mm,
I think that if someone looks at a boot camp like, okay, I'm just going to block off this amount of time every day to learn this stuff, but then I'm not really that interested in doing it, it's not really my passion,
mm,
then I think you should consider
mm,
whether it's really the right field for you to go into.
mm,
If
mm,
it's just a matter of getting a higher salary versus what you were doing before, learning a new skill and getting a higher salary versus a passion that the fire that can't be put out no matter
mm,
what, that you're going to do this stuff. So I'm looking for the latter type. Now other companies are different, but that's what we go for at TableCheck.
mm. And it's interesting that you say that, because I think there are many people who have this notion of, and I think it doesn't only apply to boot camps, but also education in itself, that you go to an institution, you go to a boot camp, for example, and you automatically are fit, or you automatically means you are, you would be okay or successful in that career path. But it takes a lot more than just being able to complete a program. It is what I'm hearing. There needs to be the passion to really want to be in that space, and not everybody has that.
Yeah, I think passion comes from, programming in some degrees is a mean to an end, right? So you're not just
Mm,
writing code for the sake of typing characters into a file and then compiling it. You're writing code
mm,
because it does something useful. And so people who want to build things, who want to build useful solutions for in our case it's our customers, it could be for themselves, it could be, who knows who it's for, right? When I was little, I used to program games for my simple games for my brother to play because I wasn't very good at playing games. So I would make things for him to play and then watch
mm,
how he played it, or put his face on the bad guy in a video game or something like that. I think that people who want to fundamentally solve problems, and then coding becomes a means to an end to doing that. Right? It's the same thing for our company.
mm,
Just so happens that writing a app is the best way to solve the problems for our customers. There's so much we can do with the
mm,
software platform that we deploy over the cloud, and then we can just roll out new features for them. But ultimately, it comes down to solving problems for our restaurant customers, and making a better booking experience for our diners. If it
mm,
happens in the future that there's some better way than the internet to do these things, then we're open to doing something different.
mm, mm. And how do you identify that passion? I mean, is it from speaking with them? Is that something that you can see before you start speaking with people who apply to TableCheck?
I think it's pretty obvious. And I one thing I do is really try to weed out in the interview. Or there's a number of questions I ask to weed out people who are coloring between the lines and just doing things sort of, as things that are taught a certain way, but not really challenging to do something creative within, for example, a framework. So someone who just uses a framework but doesn't even really understand how it works, like Ruby on
Mm,
Rails, for example, or React in JavaScript. I'm interested in the people who want to take apart the framework and want to challenge to, they'll encounter problems that can't be solved just by coloring within the lines. So I want to ask questions to see sort of how far outside the lines they've colored, and how,
mm,
if they understand how the framework is actually working because they've tinkered with it. And
mm,
so, I think that people who are passionate to solve problems and they spend a lot of time on it will eventually encounter those things. So I ask questions to try to suss that out.
In what way can applicants communicate that to you if they're kind of sending a resume and a portfolio? I think they're often people pivoting into software engineering very stressed about their resumes. It's not getting interviews. Do
Right.
you kind of look for certain things on the resume or a portfolio that communicates that to you?
Well, there's one weird trick that you can do here to instantly maximize, your our receptiveness to your resume and your interview is if you have open source work.
Hmm.
That's an immediate shortcut for us to see this guy or gal has passion projects they're working on in their free time. They care about this stuff, and that, we can actually go in and look at their code, and we can see their code quality without even having to give them a take home exam or something like that. So if we can see someone has a lot of open source work, it even becomes a shortcut for us, because it's like, okay, we can just immediately go, even before we interview them, and look at that. Look at what
Right.
they've done. And that's also, open source is the best training ground for what you're going to be doing in a company, because the way that the code is managed in 99% of open source projects is exactly the same way we manage it in our company using GitHub. So I can see that they have good coding practices, that they're writing test cases, stuff like that. That's what I would recommend to everyone. And so I would even recommend to bootcamp grads, for example, get involved in an open source thing. And if it means a couple months after bootcamp of doing it, or while you're interviewing or whatever, I would really say that that's by far the best way to prove your worth. What I don't like is, people who have worked in the industry for 15 years, but then I say, okay, can you show me some code you've done this? Well, it's all closed source because everything I've ever done is, with it under NDA with my company. And it's like, that's fine. I don't have, that is what it is. But I get the sense that this person is probably just doing it as a job, whereas open source, I think, is a clear way to demonstrate passion.
Right.
Hmm. Hmm. I had a follow-up question to that, but I think because I mean with open source project or contributions, some people can just go and fix one one error on one line of code and call that a contribution. So I imagine there is, the expectation in terms of what they're actually contributing or doing on open source projects. It's a lot more. Um, it's a lot more than fixing an error.
Yes.
I mean, I say that, but you would be surprised, like how many people put that up and say, "Yeah, I contributed on an open source code," and it's like, "What did you do?" I I fixed
Yeah.
a grammatical error. That's not.
Yeah. I mean, I've had people claim they're like a Rails contributor because they literally made like one PR that fixed like something in their fixed a typo in their README or something. And it's like, okay, get out of here. Like, it doesn't count. I would say that the open source doesn't have to be necessarily something that is super widely used. I mean, if someone
Mm,
if someone wrote the next React and then they're famous now because, they have 1 million stars on GitHub, great. But I don't really care about that. It doesn't matter how
mm,
popular it is. What really matters is the substance, the content. And if I can see someone worked on some project for a long time and made, thousands of commits over a couple year period, that shows, and they're maintaining it, and then they're interacting with people who are trying to use it, and interacting and fixing issues and stuff like that, and
mm,
reviewing other people's code. Like, this is the best way to learn, again, because it's
mm,
exactly what goes on inside a company. Well, a good company, at least. So I think it's the best way to cut your teeth and get that experience, and you don't even have to be hired for it, right? And then it becomes, that's much stronger than any words in your resume, because what we care about is the
mm,
quality of code that people are writing.
mm. Okay, great. Thank you for that clarification. Um, I just want to take it a little a step backwards for a second, because the purpose or the reason why we're doing this is really to shed some light on the experiences of companies that have hired bootcamp graduates, looking at um, the benefits and the challenges from a cost and also from a time perspective. Just from a general point of view, looking at the cost and time perspective of hiring a bootcamp graduate versus a fresh university graduate. Um, do you have anything to share on that?
Well, I would say that university graduates tend to be more skilled and more, if
Mm,
somebody studied computer science in a 4-year university program, they tend to be more skilled. Um, they sometimes tend to be, you know, I think it actually is useful to have some of the academic foundations of computer science. So they may have studied languages like Lisp. They may have done programming for, in C for embedded devices. They may have done, a broad range of programs rather than, typically university computer science degrees are not focused necessarily on becoming productive in a framework like Ruby on Rails, right? You might encounter that. That's often not the focus of a university degree. So I do think that, they tend to have a more broad foundation in computer science. And then they may, for example, be more familiar with things like machine learning, with data analysis in Python and stuff like that, that you're typically not going to get into boot camp, although some boot camps do have courses that cover that stuff. I tend to think that stuff is useful for, I think ultimately what I am wary of with bootcamp grads is this idea that you're using a framework, but as I mentioned before, coloring between the lines, and that's all you know how to do. So, Ruby on Rails, you're literally on Rails. You can follow a certain track and build things in a certain way, but as soon as a challenge arises that's beyond what you can just do by what the framework provides you, then you're completely lost. And by the way, you don't even really understand, how the framework, for example, renders the web page or does the query that you're doing. You're just using their syntax, like following a manual, but you're not really understanding what's going on. And so that's what I think that is the difference between bootcamp grad. You can be shown to use these tools, but not really understand them. And the people I'm looking for are the people who have understanding of the tools. Or it could, I'm generalizing here. I'm generalizing. So some bootcamp grads will actually get in deep and study on their own and try to learn, try to pick things apart. And those are definitely the kind of people that I'm looking for. I think that academic graduates, when they encounter a framework like Ruby on Rails, they tend to bring a broader context and skill set in analyzing how things work. So they might say, okay, when I type this syntax to generate a query, wow, it's doing so much for me, right? The framework is automating so much, so many different steps, everything from building the query, getting the syntax right, doing type conversion, then it's going down to the driver layer, and that's sending that to the database. And then sometimes it's not even sending a query to the database. And so like those kind of things, a computer science graduate, I think, will be questioning more, okay, what's really going on here? How does this actually work? And then they'll want to go in and find it out. Whereas, again, I'm not being very charitable here, but the naive bootcamp graduate will just accept that the magic works, somewhat like Mickey Mouse in the Sorcerer's Apprentice, the Fantasia thing, where he just picks up the sorcerer's wand and starts, doing magic without really understanding how that magic actually works. And that's what I worry about, is hiring too many Mickey Mouses at my company who start that they don't fully understand the consequences of.
You've hired a couple of bootcamp graduates, right? But at the same time, there is a sense that would you ever recommend companies to consider bootcamp graduates, or would you say they should consider it, but with
I think I can answer the question. The
yes,
skills
with a
that you
caveat.
learn in the boot camp in and of themselves are not enough. Not enough. You have to have passion. You have to have, in addition to that, the right attitude. You have to be a team player and know how to get along with other people. And biggest of all, you have to have innate curiosity to want to learn things.
Mm,
And if the boot camp is something that, okay, I'm going to just learn a new skill in the narrow sense so that I can get a higher paying job without really being curious about what you're learning, without being passionate about it, then it's, you're not the right fit for our company. Very plain
mm,
and simple. We're not interested in an itemized list of skills people have. We're looking to
mm,
say skills in some ways can be further developed at our company, but it's the curiosity, the passion,
Mm.
and the right attitude that is much harder to train, right? So,
mm,
in some ways, the boot camp, it matters so much less to me what people are actually learning in it. In some ways, they
mm,
might even have to unlearn some of the things they learned at boot camp when they come here. Uh,
mm,
but if you have the right attitude and you're not coming in with a lot of ego. I mean, the worst case scenario would be someone who completes a boot camp and then thinks they know everything there is to know, and then which I haven't encountered, quite frankly, but
okay.
that would be the worst case scenario, right? Because then they wouldn't learn anything
Yeah,
beyond that would be the
yeah,
Dunning Kruger effect in extreme. And I haven't
right,
encountered that, but I'm just putting that bit of hypothetical that I think there needs to be an acceptance that the boot camp is the very initial spark, the initial very beginning of your journey. But what you
mm,
need to have is the passion to get you through, climbing many more levels in this mountain.
right, right. And I mean, I can't say for other boot camps, but I can talk about, for CC, for us, we don't tell students or our graduates that they are at the peak, that they know everything when they graduate. There is no expectation. The expectation is you finish from Code Chrysalis, you continue studying because there is just so much more out there
Right.
that you don't know.
Yeah.
And so we teach developers to be software agnostic or language agnostic. So basically they should be able to learn new things. They should
Right.
continue learning and continue trying to improve.
But yeah.
So I don't, yeah, I can't speak of other boot camps, but for Code Chrysalis, we don't, yeah.
No, and my comments are not specific to Code Chrysalis or any one boot camp. To be clear, I'm just
Mm,
basically pointing out that yeah, it's so important to start to understand all the different layers. What I think you see at a boot camp is software is built on top of abstractions, right? So at the very
mm,
lowest level, you have silicon, which is a clock and a bunch of registers, and and that's doing basically low level computations, and then you know uh, you have the OS kernel, and you have machine code, and all this all these different layers, and then the frameworks, the web frameworks that are being used and taught at bootcamp are the very the most abstracted layer that's built
bruh,
on all these other
yeah.
foundations. And so um, I think that what needs to be challenged is to start to understand these different abstractions and what they're
Mm,
what they're doing. you know
mm,
uh, One interview question is, how does DNS work? Well, you
mm,
you can make a web server, great, but how is that actually going to communicate to your customers on the internet, right? Do you know
mm,
how that's actually done? And
mm,
there's so many things that are outside a box that of what is taught in order to just make a Ruby on Rails app that runs on your local machine. There's so many things you have to think about. And I encounter this, even, you'd be surprised. I mean, even senior engineers, especially
mm,
more sort of front end engineers who are building React framework, I've encountered people who really are just surprised. They don't really know how their app is actually being delivered to clients. And they're not thinking about things like latency of how fast their JavaScript is loading or things like that, because they just kind of think,
mm,
well, if I can build functionally an app that works in my local environment and pass all my test cases, then mission accomplished. But
mm,
um, I want to have people who are really curious and want to learn, and I want to make a company that I hope I have made a company where we are helping people learn those things, as well. Basically,
mm,
environment where you can ask questions and you can get involved, and even if it's not the
mm,
topic you're on, you can sit in other meetings and start to understand stuff, and be completely open about that. We also do hackathons to try to expose people to new things. But I would say today, in this era, now with ChatGPT, it's such a game changer for learning, because you can literally ask it any of these questions and it will give you the right answer. So my interview question of, how does DNS work? You can ask that to ChatGPT. It will give you a clear answer. And then if you don't understand anything, you can just say, wait a minute, you just mentioned about, a name server. What's a name server? And then you can get, a couple paragraphs explanation of that, and you can just keep going. So I think that, there's the ease of learning things in this day and age has never been easier. So I hope people are, encouraged and curious, and I want to find those people who are and hire them.
No, but I think it's great that you mentioned that, because I think back to the point you made, many people assume that once they finish, that's the end of their learning. But it's really just the beginning, and to succeed as a software engineer, you really need to be curious and also passionate, because the industry is constantly changing.
And there's so many new things to learn. I mean, no one was learning about LLMs. I mean, very, very few people were learning about LLMs two years ago, right? And now there's a whole new field that's opened up, and things are even changing daily. There's new models that are released, new techniques, new papers being published. So there's more things to learn now than there ever have been. So for me, I've been now a CTO for 11 years. I try to learn new things every day. That's the most important thing, is just to be curious and just say, oh, geez, I wonder, that's, there'll be something every day that's like, that's weird. I wonder what's going on there. And I look inside, the next box and see what I see, and then, learn what I need to learn to solve some problems. So, I mean, I think I think everything we do should be sort of a feedback loop of initially being curious about some question or some problem, and then trying to, to learn what you need to know in order to solve it, and then solving it, see how that solution worked and measuring it, and then coming back with more questions, and then keep trying to solve it. I think that's what, that's kind of the mode that I think the best engineers are constantly in.
Agreed.
In terms of if you find someone, they've got the technical acumen, the curiosity, how valuable are transferable skills for someone's coming in that they've worked in sales or marketing or teaching or other things? Are they valuable? Are they? I think when we're helping job hunters at this level, we're often trying to get them to promote their transferable skills compared to a brand new graduate to the bachelor's degree or something like that. Are there things that you pay attention for in the interview process, or are there transferable skills you found most valuable in people coming into the company?
Yeah, I think that any of those domains can be very valuable. I didn't have a computer science degree. I studied electrical engineering. I wasn't doing any programming. I was, working on semiconductor fabrication and studying things like LEDs and lasers and solar panels. But I learned from that a sort of engineering approach to problems that I think, of asking questions and then optimizing based on some target. And so I think that stuff was beneficial for sure. I think from sales and marketing, I mean, ultimately we are, at our company, we're building software for restaurants and for people who also love to, go to restaurants, for diners, for foodies. So I think that any of those, experience in sales, experience in marketing, depending on what you're doing, experience even working for a restaurant, or even just your experience as someone who wants to book, I mean, technically everyone, I don't know, but many of us have made restaurant reservations online, right? And many of our staff have. And so I think just stopping to ask about your own experience, even on some of our products, what the thing I'm trying to find is people who, I mean, for certain roles, it's actually very beneficial to have engineers who are sort of foodies and want to book good restaurants, and then have like struggle because like nothing's available or they can't find anything at a time, and then ask themselves, okay, so how can we build a system for restaurants that will, that will allow me to ultimately selfishly book where I want to book. And then, why is it that restaurants, for example, aren't opening up any tables for same day booking? What's the reason for that? And then going in and solving those problems. So, yeah, I definitely want engineers to be thinking, to be putting themselves in the customer's shoes, in the user's shoes. And I don't just at my company, I other companies are different. I think if you work at a big tech company, you'll have several layers of product and project managers who give the engineers like an exact spec of what to build. And it's like, exactly what to code, what your test cases are. It's like you're basically and that kind of coding, in a number of years is going to be replaced by a LLM. I mean, it's quite clear. Like that's, we have about maybe 5 to 10 years left on that, if that. Right. That the tools are going to be good enough that the spec will be enough to generate code. I don't know exactly when it's going to happen, so don't quote me. It's not like I don't have a crystal ball, but it's clear that it's trending in that way, because already I can put in a spec in Chat GPT and say, write me Ruby code that does this, and it will be pretty damn good. So if that's where we are now, we're definitely heading that direction. So I'm looking for people who are looking at a problem holistically and are able to be their own. We hire product and project managers as well, but I'm looking for engineers who are actually able to be their own product manager. And then I don't want to have it so that, every little question, I have to stop what I'm doing and wait 2 days because I have I want the product manager to tell me what the error message I should be putting in this case is. It's like, no, just write something and then show it to ship that, and then if they don't like it, then you can always change it later. So I want people to be autonomous, thinking, engaged about the holistic problem rather than just literally following some kind of spec.
Right.
Okay, interesting. If you could, again, because going back to the why we're here, if you could give an advice to, because I think we've talked about advice inexplicitly to potential graduates or people looking to work at TableCheck, for example. But if you could give an advice to companies looking to hire junior developers, because I think bootcamp graduates, self-taught professionals, or even university graduates, if you could give an advice to them on how to approach hiring a bootcamp graduate, what would it be?
Companies?
Yeah. Give your thoughts. And the reason why I asked this question is, hiring. The reason why I asked this question is because mid-career changers or considering mid-career professionals is something that's still gaining recognition, that companies are still considering as an option in Japan. It's not as common or is not as well looked upon as it is in the West, in Japan.
So to other companies, you should hire people who are not curious, who just want a paycheck, who just
you should or should not. I'm sorry.
And then go home. You should hire those people. Other companies.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Leave everyone else to you.
You're doing.
Yeah. Very good advice.
I see what you did there. Right. Okay. Paul, did you want to say something? You look like you want to say something.
No, I was just letting that sink in. I think you explaining what you've looked for and what's worked for you, I think is very transferable to other companies in terms of It's not necessarily just qualifications or things on the resume. It's the personality, the curiosity,
Mm.
and those other things. So I think anyone hiring, bear those in mind, and they're on the right track for a start. So.
Mm. Mm. Yeah. Yeah. When it comes to, I mean, this is not particular to bootcamp graduates or bootcamp graduates or university graduates. Just out of curiosity, when it comes to hiring software developers, what's the general cost of hiring? I'm just curious. This is not on our list of questions
Well,
now.
uh, I'm not going to give specific numbers, but I will say that salaries in Japan on a dollar basis, because the yen has become so weak, are now tending to be a bit lower than the rest of the world, which is an advantage for us to hire in Japan if we are hiring at what typical Japanese salaries are. So, and then, I will also say that the cost of living in Japan on a dollar basis it looks very cheap. I mean, in yen, nothing has really changed, right? The prices
Right.
remain the same in
Right.
yen,
Yeah.
but the yen has lost about half its value in the last couple of years. And so on a dollar
Mm.
basis, things are cheaper. So for us, I actually am, there's somewhat of a debate in this industry of whether or not you should pay people differently based on where they live. If it's more expensive to live in a certain country, I actually think you should factor that into the compensation of where they live, and basically ensure people have a salary that has them have a comfortable living wherever they are, and then some money that they can put away every month into savings. And because you can't, for example, for Japan, we can't control the FX rate, so it might actually come back,
Mm.
right? And
Mm.
so if it reverts back to where it was for the historical average of the last 10, 20 years, that's actually much stronger yen than it is now. So, I think in
Mm.
some ways we kind of just follow what the local standards are in every market, and then
Mm.
then FX will do what it will. But for now, I'm definitely biased towards hiring in Japan because it's more cost effective for us overall. Conversely,
Mm.
in some markets like the U.S., it's become almost prohibitively expensive to hire people. I mean, it's just too. And even markets like Eastern Europe, which were previously cheap, are now looking much more expensive than they were before on a yen basis. So actually,
Mm.
Japan right now in 2024 is one of the best places to hire for me. So it's where
Interesting.
also our company is, of course, headquartered in Japan, but
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a really great market. And so from that perspective, we are very receptive to boot camp grads. We do, I would say, English language, a working proficiency in English language is required for us. English is the language we use internally for development. The rest of our
Mm.
company is speaking Japanese, but for our tech team, it's English. We do hire people from all over the world, though, and we hire, I think we have tech employees in at least 10 different countries at the moment, and
Mm.
probably more than that, probably more like 15 different countries. I haven't exactly counted, but it's we have quite a diversity because ultimately we're a remote first company and we're looking for this
Mm.
talent all over. But Japan is a place that has an advantage for right now, and we'll actually
Mm.
help people move to Japan and get them a visa.
Okay. You do that now, or that's something you're moving
We've always done
towards?
that. We've always done that for the last 10 years. Anybody who wants to come and work in Japan and be with our HQ team here. And then for senior roles, that's pretty much all of our senior roles are based in Japan. So, so that we can have it. And again, we're still a remote company, but just to have, once every 2 weeks, once a month to get together, it's, there's some
Mm.
degree of face to face stuff that is irreplaceable to do every now and then. So we do look for more senior roles to be in Tokyo.
Johnny, do you have any last words for us and the audience who see this later?
To bootcamp graduates, I would say be very curious. Be you know you can do whatever you want, of course, but
Hmm.
for us, we're looking for people who are really passionate about engineering and about problem solving, and that the coding is a means to an end to do that.
Mm.
Yeah, I would say that ask questions about why things work. You can ask ChatGPT. If you're at Code Chrysalis, you can ask your instructors as well. But every day, I want to hire people who are asking questions every day. So be very curious. And to other companies, yeah, good luck. Good luck.
Okay, awesome. Thank you very much, Johnny. It's been a pleasure having you here, and yeah, we look forward to, well, from the Code Chrysalis side, we look forward to potentially collaborating and maybe sending more CC graduates to your side in the future. Otherwise, yeah, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Likewise, thank you very much.
So thanks for joining our session today with Johnny from TableCheck. Stay tuned for more sessions coming up soon.